for Winchester Planning Board meeting. We are being recorded via WinCam. Thank you very much, WinCam. And also via Zoom. If you do not wish to appear on the recording, please mute your microphones and turn off your videos. Today, we are focusing on the MBTA 3A Community Act zoning initiative that we've been going through. We had a community meeting last Wednesday, and we had a fairly, it was a reasonable turnout for short notice. So I think everyone who showed up and who was there then. And we definitely have more people with us this evening than we did last Wednesday. Let's start the meeting officially. Let's do a roll call vote. Carrie, Layton, Sally Dale,
Present.
Nick Rosettos,
Present.
I Ching Scott,
Present.
and I'm Girius. I'm present as well. We also have with us our recording secretary, Nancy Polcari, our town planner, of course, Taylor Herman, and I don't know if we have anyone else from the town with us this evening. So we're going to start off with any updates from the board.
I do. I have a really fun update. I am on the steering committee for the Mystic Lakes Path Project. This is pretty relevant to a lot of people who are attending this meeting right now. But Mystic Path is the shared walk that goes along Wedgemere Station all the way down Mystic Valley Parkway, alongside the lake, all the way down to Medford, around where the turnaround is on High and Mystic Valley Parkway. So that whole 2-mile path is getting a grant to study it for design and to make it ADA accessible. Lisa Matrandola, who is the chair of the Disability Access Commission, is also on the steering committee, along with 8 other community members from Medford and Winchester. And there is a first public meeting for it, a project overview and listening session on February 13th, Tuesday, at the Medford Public Library, the new Bloomberg Library. So I think a lot of you might be interested. It will be hopefully trying to improve that pathway for accessibility for bikes, for walking, and because it's owned by the state, it is a collaborative effort. And so it will be very important to the neighborhoods along Ginn and for everyone, since it's a path for everyone. So all welcome.
That is very exciting. This is the trail that goes along the lakes on that side of it?
Correct. From upper to lower Mystic Lakes.
Wow.
And it is to connect to all the other paths too. So along Alewife Brook and to the Minuteman Path eventually.
Cool.
Yep.
Anyone want to follow that one? Anyone has anything as exciting as that? Any more updates?
Nope.
Okay, it looks like there are no further updates. So why don't we dive into the meat of the meeting, as it were? So Taylor, do you feel like up to giving a brief summary of what happened at our meeting, the public meeting last Wednesday? Or do you want to lead with the presentation? How do you want to proceed on this?
I can go over a short discussion or go over a short, I do it in the presentation, but it's probably worth picking up now as well. I'll try to get all the timelines correct. I apologize if I get some of the dates just off, but over the last several months, the planning board and members of the community and a committee called ZRAC, the Zoning Review Advisory Committee, been working really hard together to determine what the final districts are going to be for MBTA. We'll go over what those minimum requirements are. And 2 weeks ago, on January 16th, the planning board voted to approve 4 districts: the CBD, GBD, Parkview, and North Wedge Pond. After that, we heard from several community members, and especially members from the ZRAC, about commenting about the outcome of that vote. So we held a public meeting last Wednesday at Town Hall to go over some of that discussion. It was I thought it was a very productive discussion. We got to hear what the community thought about the decision, and we got to talk about some of the questions and some of the questions that people had about MBTA 3A in general. How does that work for a summary?
That works fine. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the main takeaways that I got from last week is that the board might want to respond to some of the concerns about the that were raised with regards to the overlay districts that we had chosen. In particular, at the meeting, we heard, I think, from the ZRAC membership as well as others, there was some concern about 2 of the components of the district in the center business district. One of them was, do you want to pull up your maps, or am I going over your presentation right now? I don't want.
Maybe we just do the presentation, because
Yeah,
I leave
yeah.
time for discussion after presenting all the
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and do that? I think that's more efficient.
Oh, jumping to the end.
That's very
and that's
efficient.
it. There you go. Everything's done. Okay. So just a little bit of housekeeping for everyone old and new to the process. What is MBTA 3A? MBTA 3A is really the moniker for the MBTA Multifamily Communities Act, which was enacted as a part of the Economic Development Bill in January 2021. It is Section 3A. That's where it gets its name, of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A. It requires that an MBTA community, which Winchester is, shall have at least one zoning district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing, 3 units or more, is permitted as of right and meets other criteria set forth. So what does Winchester have to do? We have to meet an average of 15 dwelling units per acre, a minimum land area total of 37 acres. We have to zone for a minimum capacity of 1,220. Again, that's zoning for. We are not building. We are not necessarily building that. We're just zoning for it. Of the 50% of the total unit capacity and 50% of the total land area have to be within a half-mile radius of transit. I will just like to note for anyone, since I'm reading this, can someone else make sure that they're letting people into the?
I'll do that.
Thank you. So how did we get here? A little recap of what we just went over. On the 16th, the planning board voted to approve and finalize the locations and size of the district for the MBTA 3A overlay. Last Wednesday, on the 24th, an in-person public meeting was held at Town Hall to discuss the decision and collect community feedback. As an outcome from those, specifically from last week's meeting, and feedback that we've received outside of the meeting, today, January 30th, 2024, we'll be discussing that community feedback, and we may consider the possibility of revisiting the planning board's original decision. So what are some of the things that we heard? We heard a lot and tried to narrow it down to some of the most common things. The first being an ask to revise the CBD to reflect one of the 4 options that were originally presented and voted on by the ZRAC. Overall reduction in size for the overlay in the CBD. Remove historic buildings and resources from the overlay. continue to exclude Ginn Road from the overlay, and a discussion about the inclusion of 63 Vine Street. So the selected districts as of January 16th were CBD, GBD, Northwedge, CBD, Central Business District, GBD, General Business District, Northwedge Pond, and Parkview. For those who have eagle eyes, you'll notice that these totals are slightly different than what was presented last week, based off of some additional sleuthing that we've done. We've found a way to increase the size of our districts without adding any parcels. It's a very, very complex set of data, including excluded data, public lands, right-of-ways, and sensitive land. And you have to take all of them into account to come up with your final set of numbers. So we've been able to actually increase the land area using the exact same dimensions that we were that were presented from last week. Each district in a little bit more detail. From left to right, we have CBD, Northwedge Pond, GBD, and Parkview. So one of the, I would say, most commented things was having the planning board revisit their selected CBD district. So on the 16th, the board voted to approve the purple, the map on the right, the map on the left. That's the approved district. However, option 4 appeared to be the preferred option for members of the ZRAC and other members of the community. This is really the minimum amount that we can include in the CBD. The biggest difference is the exclusion of this area that was added below the museum district and over to Converse Court, and this area, this block right to the west of Quill Rotary. We heard a lot of feedback asking for those to be removed. So what would happen if those were removed? Well, we would still comply. Our total area would be 44.8 acres, 31.1% being within that half mile. So we have plenty. It only needs to be 18.5, so we have plenty within the half mile. If we were to use that option 4, which really should be considered the minimum land area that we can use in the CBD, we would still comply. So the board has a few options tonight, as well as having a discussion, and these are just my suggestions to the board. You can make up your own opinion on how to move forward, but I think that the board may choose to keep the model that they originally approved on the 16th. If the board decides to revisit their originally approved districts, the CBD overlay can be reduced in size to be option 4. And our overlay will still comply. And I would like to suggest to the board that you consider the approval of a reserve district, which would essentially be used as a district as a backup plan if something becomes non-compliant in our model. We have a place to add area without having to come back and have a discussion about it at a later date. This does not mean that it has to be added permanently now. It just means that it would be added if something comes up in the end. And my suggestion there would be the E2 district of the GBD. This is a 6-acre piece of land. It's not within the half mile, but it retains contiguity. There's a very, very high probability that this will always continue to comply if this is used. This, of course, is just an option. but it's something that I suggest. So finally, we have the two options. Model on the top is from the originally approved January 16th model. Model on the bottom is the updated January 30th today model with the smaller CBD area.
Thanks, Taylor. And one piece of information I think it's good for the board to know, and I know we haven't talked densities yet, but how close are with the, we had talked about the overlay districts using the underlying existing density. Can you tell me something about where we are in terms of the actual number of units? I know at some point
1,240 based off of existing zoning.
So we are very close in the sense that other communities have been trying to have an extra about a 10% overage for their number of units, just in case something gets from the state finds a problem with the
maybe having the reserve district will be the answer to that.
Well, I think I think when we look at the reserve district, I think there are I have some significant questions about how we handle that, and how we handle that while we still keep our concept of a mixed use along GBD. That's one of the reasons, one of the big discussions we had about by right use in the CBD in the original layout was how we protect first floor commercial. And so that's why don't we so that's something the board should keep in mind, is that we do have to beef that up. But why don't we
no, we probably need the reserve district anyway.
I agree. I just when I think about where we're going to get the more units, I think that's a deeper discussion that we can dive into. But why don't we have the board discuss, if we go around the board and just see what your opinions are on the discussion last Wednesday and the suggestions that Taylor has brought before us this evening in terms of handling the concerns. So why don't we start? Nick, you want to go ahead?
I guess I got a couple things. So I just wanted to address the piece that Sally put together. I thought it was very comprehensive about the protections for historic buildings. But I think it's very important to note regarding that it's under special permit that there's a body of state law which gives those protections teeth. So it's only under special permit that you could sue under the law. And under a special permit, you have those protections. As soon as you move to by right, there is no body of law. It's I mean, you wouldn't be able to sue over it, and the protections would be kind of a handshake or a suggestion. So I think that from that standpoint, it's misleading to suggest that those protections are binding and exist in the by right context. I think I can't stress that enough. I think that's a very important point, because I think that it influences how we see the historic properties under the by right new zoning as being protected. And in fact, they really aren't protected. I guess to address the specific issues that came up at the meeting, it probably wouldn't be too hard to exclude 62 Vine Street. It's a very small property. And it was, I think it was an issue that was specifically protected in a previous discussion by this board when the True Value development was brought forward. So I'm not sure why it's in there, but we might consider excluding that. I think some of the members of the community indicated that they wanted to do that.
Could we get a map of where 62 Vine is? Excuse me, Taylor, because I have no idea where 62 Vine is.
It's right behind True Value Hardware Store. I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
It's on the property of the Fells Hardware.
It's right behind it.
So
It
that's
actually is
actually
on the property of Fels Hardware. I think they use it for storage.
that's actually part of a development which was approved by
Right,
the
and
planning board.
and the development, I think, was protecting that building. I think that was specifically called out in the negotiations
That's
surrounding
correct.
that development.
That was correct because the
I'm just also looking at
yeah,
there are some comments. I'm looking at my email.
so can we get an idea of how you feel about moving from the past option towards the option 4? And then we can talk about
yeah,
then we can,
I think that I like I think the ZRAC is very astute in kind of understanding that our historic resources need protection and that by right is not going to afford those protections. And I think that I would be in favor of accepting the ZRAC's recommendation to go with scenario 4.
okay. We can, if we want to move on to what we do with the purple area, why don't we do that in the next round? So, because I just want to move us forward on that. Carrie?
Okay, so I'd like to thank the ZRAC, first of all. I think they put in, I don't know if we sort of say that often enough. They put in a ton of time. They met like weekly through pretty much the holidays, which was, bordering on heroic, really. And I am comfortable with their option 4, and I think they spent a lot of time sort of thinking about that. And I felt like the additional parcels that we added on were we probably didn't have enough time to sort of digest those. And I think there's some problems with some of the properties that would be obstacles that we probably don't want to invite. So since we're compliant with the purple district as is, I think that's great. I like the idea of a reserve district, and I hope we spend at least an extra minute thinking about St. Mary's, which I think for everything else, I think we've given really thoughtful discussion to, and it sounds like we'll look at that reserve district tonight, but I do want to spend just a minute on the option of using part of St. Mary's so that we know that we've sort of fully answered those questions too, because that definitely came up a couple of times at that Wednesday meeting.
Okay, so let's I've got 2 things on my list, which is 62 or 3 Vine, and then
63, it looks like, from
63,
the email.
and then St. Mary's. Okay, thank you. I Ching.
Taylor, can we see the map that we voted in? That's possible. I like the way that Carrie put it, in that I think some of the things that we added in, so the south of the museum district all the way to Converse, as well as the area next to the Congregational Church, those were sort of late at night when we were trying to gain the buffer that would give us some leeway, so that if it is questioned, that we would be able to still be compliant. I think that's my biggest concern right now, is to protect the town with compliance by having something that gets voted through. Like that's critical. And the area around Converse, I think that we had talked about it a lot, about how by right, they already have some by right issues, and that they're along the waterway, and a lot of some of the other bylaws that restrict that development, it's very difficult to develop there, even with by right issues. And so it was almost like a throwaway, but in order to gain us more buffer, it was a way to get more area. So I understand how touchy that area is, and I don't want to invite that into town meeting. And I think seeing the ZRAC in person last week, it was helpful to have that mini town meeting, and seeing that flare up and be so sensitive. And so My question though, however, is that, you know, along Shore Road, those 3 parcels are already high density, and that are we, you know, willing to also give that up when we give up Converse? So, you know, it doesn't seem like we need that as a buffer, but it is already very high density residential. So I wonder about that. And the area around the Congregational Church, and I really appreciate Sally's deep dive into the historical stuff, and all you talk about, it's I feel like the historical protections, it seems to me from hearing so much about it, is very low, in that there's very small protections of it. However, from some development perspectives, from sort of a general understanding of development, that very few people would tear down that much, you know, beautiful stuff in order to build something new. So, but I understand that it gets really hot topic, and I don't want to invite that kind of conflict either. And so if we can give that part up, I think it would be all right. So, you know, I think the new numbers help it a lot. I want it to get through town meeting, and I want it to be smooth. But also from the town's perspective too, in this idea of multi-unit development allows us to gain more revenue as a town, which we highly need. I would want hope for some area where there would be likely development, so that we can sort of definitely serve our population, but also be able to financially, you know, bolster the town with residential tax revenue. And I think this law would help really gain a positive for that, and something that this town really actually very much needs from a financial perspective. So I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Sally?
So just looking at the purple map, including the one that we, specifically the one that we voted last month or last week. The reason, so I'm happy to have historic properties taken out. Let me address that first. The research that I did identified site plan review as the primary vehicle, and design guidelines or development standards are also allowed within 3A districts. Those would not necessarily prevent somebody from tearing down a mid-century modern bank building. To I Ching's point, I think people would be insane to do that, given the charm and the appeal of both the building and the town, and the impact it would have on that. But one cannot trust in that. One must legislate. And if site plan review is insufficient in the 3A process to protect the tear down of a historic building, then I understand the need to remove them from our districts. However, if it comes to a building that compromises contiguity, I think we really need to think very hard about that. Fortunately, we're not in that situation. But if we're crafting a reserve district and we find that there's a historic building that would break contiguity of a district, which is one of the rules, we would have to think very hard about that. So fine, to take out the buildings that are near the Rotary on one, I guess, is Vine Street. I never knew it wrapped all the way around like that. And then with regards to the buildings on the right across the tracks, I agree with I Ching that the first 3 buildings are a logical inclusion because they're already multifamily buildings. And the reason that we included the public safety building and the properties on both sides of Converse Place is for acreage, not unit capacity. And I view the Converse site as what's the category, Taylor, not able to be built on, but
I'm sorry, are they housing or are they offices?
One's office, one's housing, but they're multi-story. And so if there was a use, it could be residential. What I want to say about the 10 Converse Place lot is that 3A is a zoning bylaw, and it does not change underlying non-zoning laws. Underlying non-zoning laws on the 10 Converse Place include environmental protections from the state and view protections from a town bylaw. In fact, as far as I know, the proposal to develop that land was the first test of that town bylaw that I can think of, but it would be interesting to research. At any rate, I don't think that that 10 Converse Place can be built on, but I do think it proves to be valuable acreage. And so that was why I was putting it in, not because I want to see a multifamily housing building on that site. And including that gives us contiguity to the other two properties on Converse Street, which could potentially become mixed use multifamily. And we could certainly find a way to achieve that, I believe. So I asked our consultants for more clarity on the historic thing, and I haven't heard back, but that's where I've landed on all of this. And so, and I also strongly encourage us to come up with a reserve. I understand that once you submit, once we meet our deadline of December 30th, 31st of 2024, we hand it to the state, we say we complied. There's no timeline that the state has committed to tell towns if they have approved their districts. Many districts have already, because they're in a different category than we are, and there's no timeline for approval. So having that reserve district done now could save us from having to completely revisit the whole thing if the state tells us, 18 months later, I don't know, that we have to make a modification. So I'm in favor of the reserve district. I'm in favor of modifications at the Quill Rotary. I would recommend that we keep the lots that are to the east of the railroad tracks for the reasons that I stated. And then let me just see what else people touched on that I could add to my remarks. I want to say thank you to the ZRAC, to echo what Carrie said. You guys worked really hard, and we're extremely grateful for the thought that you put into this. And I think that is what I have. Thank you, Dan.
No, thank you, Sally. So I guess it's my turn to weigh in on this. So I have to say at the outset that I'm actually disappointed that we haven't chosen all of the CBD, because I think that the heart of 3A is to ensure that we have sufficient density and housing near transit. And I understand the concerns of the town, but I really wish that we could have gone more towards the original overlay districts. In terms of the, but I've heard from the town. In terms of the historical protections, to be honest, I don't know that the overlays would actually, I think Sally's work and certainly Nick's comments about how they don't enhance protection. I think that any by right projects in the center business district on historical buildings, we wouldn't be, those are already at risk if there are of tear downs. But again, nobody in their right mind, I think, and looking at developments around our area, nobody tears down old historic structures in things like banks and such, because those are really key redevelopment sites, and people pay lots of money to move into those when they're turned into residential. But I do understand that there are a number of people in town who think otherwise. I personally don't see that as a risk, but I agree with Sally and I Ching that I think that the buildings along South Shore or along Shore Road are very much in terms of what we would want. They are existing multi-story buildings. I find I doubt that they would actually be torn down. I do think they could get renovated into different space. They're too expensive to tear down, and they're certainly in good condition. One of them actually is an existing fairly new condominium building, so I don't think that's going to be torn down at all. The office buildings could be reused. So I'm in favor of keeping the three buildings along Shore Road. I understand the concerns about 10 Converse Place. I don't know, we included it because we were worried about area. Taylor's new calculations show us that we don't have that concern. So I'm ambivalent about keeping it in. Again, I think it's a great place to put multifamily housing. Certainly I voted in favor of the 10 Converse Place development because I thought it was a great place to put housing in there. I don't think that the amount of the housing we would get from a multifamily versus what's going into 10 Converse would be different in terms of the type of units. Any by right construction on that site would necessarily be smaller than the 10 Converse Place because that came in through a special permit, which gave them more height because of the PUD. We would still be, it all comes down to what the owners of that lot want to do. They paid a pretty penny for it, and I imagine they're going to want to recoup their investment. So I also share I Ching's concerns about getting this through town meeting. I think this is not going to solve Winchester's housing problems. I think the fact that we already are looking at densities which actually comply with the state's directives means that we are not going to be seeing an awful lot of housing built because of this. And I think that's the big takeaway is that we're using existing density for these overlay districts, and we're able to meet the required number of Zone 4 units, which means we're not going to be seeing any real new units built here other than people who might have been sitting on the fence for a while wondering, is there a way to avoid some of the lengthy battles that sometimes go on with housing? But they'd eventually go that route anyway, I believe, because there's a lot of money in housing. So I don't really see that we're going to get a lot of new housing out of this. So this is not going to give the town any respite from its terrific need for new housing. So the important part for me is to get this through town meeting and then really think hard about how we're going to come up with other ways of solving our housing. 3A is not going to do it for us. It wasn't really designed for towns like Winchester where we have this sort of dense zoning already. So I don't have a problem with removing the block, which includes the banks. I mean, that's a small amount, although I think those buildings are eminently redevelopable as multifamily housing, residential housing. I think it'd be great places. I don't think anyone's going to tear those buildings down. So I'm again, I would like to keep some of the units on Shore Road, some of the lots on Shore Road. But I am open to change to go from this map to more like option 4, which is what the ZRAC, all of the comments we got last Wednesday were the ZRAC was looking more towards that unit. So again, and like everyone else, I want to thank the ZRAC for their really honest conversations that we had. It was incredibly important and useful. So how do we want to go about this? Do we want to now take a vote and talk about what we want to move on this? Do we want to?
Can I ask,
Yeah.
Taylor, do we have a definitive answer? I thought part of why we kept sort of going from Shore Road over to the public safety building to 10 Converse was because we weren't sure if the parcels on the other side of the train tracks counted as contiguous?
My recollection from Jay Tollerman was that it most likely was contiguous across the tracks.
Okay, so how does that help our density?
And then that would allow us to have those 3 parcels without anything else, because they would be contiguous with the buildings on the other side of the tracks. And that's my recollection of Jay's, what he was explaining.
So one question I might have is to Taylor, do you know, I mean, the public safety building can be included in order to give us enough area. If that added up to 5 acres, then we wouldn't have to worry. So Taylor, do you know if those 3 buildings on Shore Road plus the public safety area, is that anywhere close to 5 acres?
No, it is not. It's not close to 5 acres. You also, since the public safety building will be the end of that contiguity, it won't be counted. You can't add on. You can't add on town-owned land at the end of your district.
That makes sense.
Yep.
And one other thing, Carrie, to answer your question about the density, since we currently comply and meet our density goals, it's actually not necessary. If we're trying to play the game to include density by including those 3 parcels, that's not necessary.
Well, do you have
because
we think that we're very close for units, and if that's already an existing condo of good density that's already contiguous, and the other one's offices.
Yeah, we are certainly close on unit count, but we aren't. But we far exceed our density. It's we're roughly, I think the required density is 15. I believe we're at 21, so it's not going to assist in our density numbers, but we could potentially use it for our units.
Okay, well, maybe just keep it in mind. I don't think we should vote on anything till we finish talking about everything, but I just want to clarify those parcels.
One other question too is, I didn't hear from the ZRAC meetings that I attended or from the letters that people were opposed to those 3 parcels. Is that correct, Taylor? Is that what you sense?
There might be individuals who are opposed to those. I didn't hear that multiple times. I heard more of the district as a whole crossing the railroad tracks. There was more opposition about including anything over rather than those individual buildings. I don't think that we really have discussed those parcels as individuals with the ZRAC. We've more discussed it as an area.
And using that part, just 3 parcels out of the 15, say, between that and the one closer to the river, there could be a challenge to say why not include us too? Why not include these parcels, right? Like there are some parcel owners who might want to be included and are excluded from that.
So I sit here with the map, doing the distance between the closest corner of the building and the river, and those 3 parcels are all outside the 200-foot buffer. I mean, just in terms of, and there's not, a single family or a smaller building that would go down to become multifamily. Those are 3 sort of already multi-unit buildings. So they're sort of in a distinct category. I spent some time walking around back there, and those are good.
So you're saying you're for that then, Carrie?
Can we pull some buffers if we need them? It's not, I like purple as is, but if we need a couple of buildings for one thing or another, it's something to keep in mind.
Right. And it seems like the unit count might be a factor, and that includes a lot of units, actually.
Right. So just something, I just wanted to vet that a little more thoroughly before we move on, but I think we should probably move on.
So can I just chime in about the 3 buildings? I think it makes sense. It gives us unit capacity, and it gives us acreage, both of which we can use buffer on, and it is not a substantial change to the look and feel of the town if those 3 buildings were all multifamily.
Yeah, it's a low
So I
risk.
think it makes a lot of sense to include those three. As for the historic houses that are between those three lots and just going up the way towards the museum, that's a wonderful little complex of what surely are historic homes. And I would love to see these preserved and celebrated however they can be, especially because they're already built inside of setback areas. If you take them down, they can't be rebuilt. And it's a very charming little asset to our village. So I would still continue to encourage us to include the three lots, but nothing else on that side.
Mhm.
And I think that's where I'm at on that.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to say, Taylor, is when we go back to your chart that shows acres and square feet and percentages, or I guess it just shows acres and percentages. It was hard to tell when you went through your presentation for new viewers, which was an acreage number and which was a percentage number. So next time we return to that chart, we can refresh our minds on that. That's what I have.
They're
Okay.
they are all acres, but I'll make that point when we go back.
Okay, so I think we reached a general consensus on the map. Now let's move on to the two other issues that were raised were 63 Vine and St. Mary's. So we can go on and and talk about 63 Vine.
63
On the-
Vine, it looks like it's on the edge of the purple area, so it wouldn't be a contiguity problem, and it appears to be a house that people value. As many of the neighbors wrote in and wanted to protect it, and it was. I think it was an issue protecting it the last time as I mentioned, the last time it came up in front of the board, there was a decision that it would be preserved. So I think it would make sense to continue that line of thought regarding that building. It doesn't strike me as a big a big negative effect to the numbers.
Nick, my question to you and to the community members about this is that since this building is already permitted and its preservation is already permitted, it retains its existing zoning. So if we were to change the overlay, what additional protection are you looking?
I don't know.
I
don't know for certain what protection it has, and like my understanding is that this deal could fall through, or I don't know. I don't know the particulars of the deal that was done, but the sense that I get from the community is that that the building is in danger, and I don't. I mean, if there was a deal that was done, I don't know if that's going to materialize. They were supposed to, I think, develop the lot, and the board prior to my joining voted on a design, but that hasn't happened. Economic conditions have changed, and it may not happen. So we may not be able to rely on anything that was done in terms of protection. So it might make sense just to remove it now.
So I was on the board that made the decision on that lot. It was part of the development agreement was try to maintain it and actually to renovate it, so that it would come back to some of its former glory, whatever glory it had. In order to make it work with that lot, they actually were going to move it towards in this diagram, towards the upper left of the lot in order to provide enough area for what all the other stuff they were doing. The house is in pretty bad condition. I don't, you know, there are certainly people who feel that it's worth saving. I really don't know what the effect this has on, I mean, so the reason why this hasn't been developed for a while was it went through multiple appeals, and it was, I think, at the beginning of sometime last year that the final appeal was, they exhausted the final appeal. I don't know if we change the underlying zoning, how that's going to affect development of this area. The
What's
benefit
about changing the underlying zoning? What do you
Well,
s-
if we
I
change
mean,
it to
putting
by
the
right,
overlay, you're correct. It's the overlay. Yeah, I mean, this building requires a lot of money to fix up. And so I don't know that someone would have to want to buy this lot from the current owner. I don't know. You know, you raise a good question, Nick, what the future of this development is. And
So,
I don't,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
I mean, someone wrote, you know, please exclude this. I don't know, so one of the neighbors, MJ English.
yeah. I mean,
so, can I say that I was at the time when we were debating the 654 Main Street condominium project on this big, larger site, in favor of preserving this building, although I didn't think that the solution that was proposed was particularly preservationist sensitive, but I know that they did the best they could. And I think it's unfortunate that after all that work, this project has not moved forward with an approved permit. I don't know how long building permits are good for, but I think taking this lovely building out of the 3A district doesn't impact that development if it goes forward, because it's already voted to be preserved, or there's already a building permit that covers it. So we could take it out of the 3A district and still, if it was never developed according to the plans that were approved by the planning board, we would keep the adjacent sites, the one to the left and behind this picture, in the 3A, and that would work for me.
Right, and I'd agree with that. Someone has their hand up, and I feel like this system of having to be a I think we should just listen, hear what they have to say, because I think the format's restrictive, and so I'd like to see what this person has to say.
well, I think, in my opinion, this is a planning board meeting. It's not a public hearing. So that's my opinion. I would like us to move forward and make a decision on this. What does the rest of the board think of?
It's such a small lot. I just, again, I don't think it adds acreage or unit count so much just in a very technical way. And I just would, it seems like a friction that's unnecessary. It's too bad that this lot and this particular building, if we don't put it in the 3A overlay, I find it very difficult, because it will likely retain this sort of unkept way, and I don't think that is very good for the neighborhood either. So, you know, it doesn't, I don't know why there's such a resistance to letting this take advantage of some of the redevelopment ease, because this is an eyesore.
I'm sorry.
So no, I would want to include it, just because it would help it to make it a better building. But without this friction, I don't know if it's worth it. We're already taking so much time on it.
Does anyone with historic knowledge of the debate around that you're saying the same group owns this and the Fells Hardware. Are they worried it will be developed into one larger thing if the current deal falls through? Is that the concern, that these parcels will be merged?
Yeah,
They're
I think
re-
so.
They're already merged. And to be
They're
honest,
owned
the
by
only,
one company, one owner.
they're my one owner.
So protecting the house is essentially trying to make sure that is kept as a single small. Was that part of the deal? Was that part of the?
It is actually two separate lots. So they
Two
originally
separate.
tried to come in and do a subdivision, they tried to combine the lots originally, and then they tried to subdivide, which they eventually dropped.
Okay.
And right now it's considered as two separate lots, I believe, with the same owner. Let me check.
Okay.
Is
Yes,
the
it
historic
is the
house-
same
The
owner.
current agreement
Okay.
falls through. People are worried this will be a very large development. So
Okay.
It's, you know, to be honest, this came through with the special permit. If in order to do the development they wanted, if they wanted to do it by right, that house would come down right away. It's already gone through demo delay, so there's nothing preventing anyone from taking it down as we speak.
mhm.
And if they decide they don't want to go through a special permit, even under current zoning, it could come down tomorrow. So there's,
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you have a demolition delay that has expired, does that delay transfer with the property to the next owner?
it does not,
That's
but
what I thought.
since I don't know whether the current owner has been owner of this land for a long time. That's the
Well,
person
they
who owns
use it. They keep stuff there. It's important.
Yeah, but if they're intent on developing this land, they'll demo it before they sell it.
Maybe.
That, you know,
They
if I
could
were,
certainly do that because they have passed the demo delay and they're the current owner.
yeah,
and the delay
so
applies.
I don't know that taking it out of the multifamily actually provides it any more protection, because
Well,
I don't think it has any protection right now.
Well, it would go
well,
through.
it's under special permit now, as opposed to by right. And special permit, those historic protections that Sally outlined could be enforced under state law. Whereas if it goes to by right, there's really no enforcement. There's no teeth in any kind of protections that might be there. I think it's the shape of the building. It's the sense of contiguity with the other buildings on the street.
The historic, John Clemson from the Historical Commission did a lot of research on this, and apparently its claim to fame is that it's of a particular style of construction, which is what sets it apart. It's one of the last remaining, or if not the last remaining building in the center business district of this particular type of construction. It's already been moved once. So this is not its original location. And by right now, this building can come down. It has no protection right now. So
if it's the current owner that chooses
yes,
to.
if the current owner chooses to not go forward with the project that was granted under special permit and just wants to tear it down right now, they could do so. They would not be able to do the project which was agreed, that was okayed by the board under special permit. But if they wanted to develop the rest of the lot by right, they could take this down right now. There is no protection right now. The only protection is if they complete the special permit project, but under by right at this moment, they could come in and take it down.
I don't think we gain much by keeping it, and I think we lose some political points. I think as a smaller parcel, it does help provide the buffer that the neighbors raised, that it sort of it would be a two-step development process, and I think that will be helpful to, you know, at least the hearts and minds, if not the, you know, dotting the i's and crossing the t's. So I think we learned a lot through the discussion. I'm glad we had it, but I think it's.
So why don't we
has a story to tell.
why don't we do a straw vote right now on this one? It'll be binding, but let's just move on so we can move on from this. Why don't we go around and ask who wishes to have it removed from 3A? Nick?
I would like to have it removed from 3A.
Okay, Carrie?
I think it's probably worth removing.
Okay. I Ching?
Yeah, I think for political ease, yes, let's remove it.
Okay, Sally?
I agree. I would remove it from the 3A district.
Okay, and I would like to keep it in, but that doesn't matter. It's 4-1 against. Okay, so
Well, that
we've
wasn't a
dealt
vote.
with.
So we're going to vote after we go through all our conversations, and there was one more, I believe.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about St. Mary's, and a lot of people at the meeting last week were wondering about our decision not to include St. Mary's in our discussion. So my recollection is in our discussion about St. Mary's, it was really about what kind of leverage the town had. That's my recollection. Please tell me if I'm wrong.
No, it
It
was a
was
leverage issue.
it was a question of what leverage would the town have in terms of trying to move development in a certain direction. So for instance, if this were a 3A by right district, then there was a question raised as to what would happen to the school. And the original district, Taylor, actually, I think we talked about the original district rather than this one, that one. So this is the one that was less, I think it didn't include as many single family zoned or single family lots. And so the question we had was, if this were in 3A, how do we protect the historical structures, namely the church and the school? And all of the concerns people have raised about protection of historical structures falls onto those two buildings. The same questions have to be raised here. And my recollection is we decided that since if this weren't under 3A, they would have to come to the town to ask for a change in zoning because this is not zoned for residential use. And that at that point, we could use that leverage to put in protections for the historical structures. So that's my recollection. Please remind me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that sounded right, because I was trying to articulate the leverage that we had the other day, and I couldn't get there. What you said was if we put it in 3A, it becomes subject only to site plan review protections. If we don't put it in 3A, the church and the school, as part of if they were to be developed as housing and someone wanted to tear them down, we would have the special permit process to work very hard to prevent that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they would have to, if this were to not go through 3A, in order to develop that as residential, we would have to go to town meeting to change the zoning.
Ah, I
It's
see.
not because it's SCI, and if you're trying to do something that's not allowed in the SCI district, and no one would, I think that they would probably want to turn this into residential. That would require a vote by town meeting to change the zoning on this property.
But
Right.
it could be done by parcel if it's not part of 3A, and 3A would have to make it a 5-acre area.
That's right. Right.
So this would be a non-contiguous, so it would have to be 5 acres.
Right. And it is, right, Taylor? Either configuration, with or without the church, is a 5-acre.
Correct.
And the reason I didn't favor the other configuration is because it's one of the few places where a single family structure, this is if we did the other scenario on just the church, and then the 1, 2, 3, 6 lots towards the high school, I guess. Those 6 lots are 1 and 2 family, and that would be one of the only places in town where we would be putting a 3A district on a 1 or 2 family lot.
Mhm.
And so I just thought, well, how do those people feel about that? Geez. And so because this is either business or SCI, is that right?
SCI.
Yeah.
SCDI.
So that is, as you said, a vote of town meeting to put this configuration into 3A would not protect the 2 historic structures according to our analysis. And so either way, this is why I wasn't thinking it was a good idea.
And I'm not necessarily thinking it's a good idea. I just thought we needed to have the public discussion about it. Another thought, and this might just be really unpopular, but I'm saying it out loud. Another thought is that I think we're underestimating the number of kids that might move to town, and this is a built school building. And there may be a timing where St. Mary's needs to unload a building and Winchester needs to find one. And I think having the flexibility to sort of, get involved with the parcel in that way if we need it I think that's something that should be thought about.
So that would be to not put it in a 3A.
Yeah. I mean, I like the idea of it, but I don't think it's an appropriate. For the reasons that you're describing, I like the little single family area right there. I think the school building would be kind of great as housing. But I think I think the church would be tricky, and it would be a shame to lose the church. I think it could be developed more creatively, even if it was not continued as the church. I think there's a lot of love for the St. Mary's community, and I think it's a tricky parcel to roll into this and lose some of the protections for that particular building. And if we swing it around and include the single families, I think that will change the character of that corner quite a bit. And I think the town wants. I think the town has other possible uses for the school if it becomes available at some point. So I think for those reasons, it was great to consider it, but I don't think it's the right thing for 3A. But I know ZRAC spent a lot of time coming up with that area, and I want to spend some time thinking about it.
Okay. Any other comments on St. Mary's?
I was also thinking about it from the town's perspective too. So the SCI, I didn't think about that, Carrie, as another, using it as a school, continuing to using it as a school for the town would be interesting.
For swing space.
Yeah. But I was thinking more of a more private public project that is possible, kind of like Waterfield or Washington Swanton, where we are able to control the 40B issues that our town is facing in dire need of. And it is such a great location for that purpose, because it's so close to town. Not just for 40B, but just a way to control more of the changes that might be happening. And we don't know that it's happening either. I think this is still, we don't know what the owners are going to do with the property. So all that makes it feel like there would be more possibilities if we didn't include it in the 3B. And because it is so separated from the rest of the contiguous area, the necessity to make it 5 acres seems to make the fringes a little bit awkward, either this way or the other one where we're going into towards the town. So I think it's great because it is within the half mile. I mean, all of that's wonderful. Be a nice neighborhood, but there seems to be more, just more possibilities if we didn't include it. Very intriguing site.
Okay. I just want to point out that if this building was reused as a school, I think we would have to go to EFPBC and ask how much money it would cost to renovate it, because I'm pretty sure that probably hasn't been touched in a long time.
I'm not saying it would be easy. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know. I've
had a couple of people mention Swim Winchester might want it. So no.
Where would they put the pool?
That's not my problem, Deb.
Good answer.
That is a great answer. So I'm getting a sense that the consensus is that we're going to keep our original decision to not include St. Mary's. Is that correct?
For the reasons described.
For the reasons described. I think that so just because we are actually already at 8:30 and we still have a lot of other things to discuss this evening. So I want to
talk about Ginn Road?
I think that's what we should move to, unless we want to talk about the extras. We can talk about Ginn Road, and then we should talk about Taylor's
Reserve.
suggestion.
We should add that extra space. I'm I'm a little concerned, Deb, that you say we have a lot of stuff to discuss. So if that's the case, we should get this done.
I agree. We do have.
I'm a little curious as to what we have to discuss, but
Well, if you look at the packet that we got, we have a whole bunch of use tables. We're going to talk about
there
that's
was no
all.
packet, but
There was a I'm sorry, there was Sally's, there was Taylor sent, oh, that should have been in a packet for public viewing. Taylor sent it out.
Dia, we actually never intended on having that meeting tonight.
yeah, this was supposed to be just an add-on. It wasn't supposed to be a full-blown meeting. So this was an
Actually, it
add-on
was,
to really finish up our discussion that was getting too late at night the last time.
no, we never just have add-ons. We always have full-blown meetings. We have a lot, we have to talk about densities. We have to talk about uses. We don't have a
Okay,
lot of
well,
time.
why don't we
between
get through this then? Why don't we,
So let's
I guess,
so let's
talk
talk
about that.
about, let's deal with Ginn Road then.
Okay.
So we heard a number. So just for everyone out there in the and who wasn't at our previous meeting where we discussed the Ginn Road, the planning board decided against including Ginn Road for a number of reasons. Some of which were that the likelihood of it's a single family area at present. And we understand that turning this into a multifamily district would be disruptive. Also, there was the understanding that there's likely not going to be the room or the possibility rather of any multifamily units coming in here because a lot of the neighborhood has just recently been redeveloped. While we don't, and am I incorrect in that
Not a lot,
summation?
but a good number.
Yeah. Any other, so shall we discuss again quickly in terms of what we heard last week? And we certainly have heard a lot from residents in the area who have told us in no uncertain terms that they're not in favor of this becoming a 3A district.
I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it. I just hope that the folks who are politically active to protect Ginn Road are politically active in lots of issues around town.
Yeah, it was really gratifying to see all the letters and all the participation. At the last hearing, you could count on one hand the number of people who turned up that were not on the ZRAC and not on the planning board. And I totally agree with Carrie. I'm gratified to see all the interest now, and I think that's democracy in action. I hope that zeal will translate into other areas of importance to the town.
Okay, so
I would add that this is exactly the kind of sensitivity that I have tried to keep in mind through this entire process, that rezoning a single family neighborhood to a 3A district is very, very different than rezoning an existing business district or an existing multifamily district. Not rezoning, excuse me, overlay zoning.
I want to add as a neighbor with the voice too, in that I live on the other side of Bacon. And as a resident, I think that our discussions have been in a way that makes it very hard for somebody to understand maybe what is proposed. I think it's being thought of as done to your neighborhood. And I do want to reframe it in a little way, in that like all of us actually have the right now to build another unit, an ADU. You don't have to be disabled or be senior. You can actually build it for somebody who's disabled and senior. So in that way, most of us have an expanded right to our property. And this is an expanded right to your property if you were under this. I have by right to redo my kitchen, and I haven't done it in 7 years, right? Like there's a lot of factors that go into these things. But this would be an expansion of rights, and I feel like it needs to seep in to in the next time if we do present this again. This is an expansion of a right to build, and it is hopefully just be seen as a privilege in some ways, that I can build something for my adult child who might need some place to live, or my elderly mother who needs a place to live and can't find it in town. And that could be something that many neighbors might say, why not include us? I want to be part of this. This is kind of an amazing opportunity. And for even property value wise, the ability to convert a single family into a 3-unit at $1.5 million each. I mean, that increases property value from the town side as an added huge bonus, but also from a property owner side as a total increase in your property value. But that aside, I think we had to do a lot of legwork to educate people on what this might mean for them, and it was put on too fast. I think there are a lot of reasons for, maybe some against, and I hope that this discussion continues, because I think that maybe if we are able to understand it more thoroughly, more people would actually see it as why not? Why aren't I included? I want to be part of this. But
yeah.
So, I Ching, I think that in addition to the ADU opportunities that are available to every single and duplex owner in town, I think that and 3A is all about the next, 10, 20, 30 years horizon. You lay the zoning and the market will determine what is actually proposed. And it might come down in sometime in the next 20, 30 years that certain parts of Winchester that are currently single family might be rezoned to be 2-family or 3-family, but it would be a completely separate thing from an as of right 3A. And that's just way down in the future. So keeping it out of 3A is where I stand.
Okay.
yeah, I think it's too radical an idea right now.
Right.
When we haven't done enough legwork.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the sentiment, I Ching. I think these are the conversations that we need to be having, and I'm glad that you articulated and brought it up at the meeting.
Okay.
So I'm guessing the consensus is that we continue with our original decision, which was to leave this out of 3A. That seems to be the consensus.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so let's move on to Taylor's suggested buffer, or whatever we call that, reserve.
That's right. So I have a question about the reserve. If we vote this reserve, and we don't find out from the state for a year or a year and a half what's approved, or maybe it's 6 months, but still, and then we find out we have to do this reserve, how does that work with votes and our North Main Street redistricting and definition of districts? And I don't see how it works.
So
would it be just to include it in 3A as just include it, and it acts as an overflow, so that if something else gets taken away, the mass is big enough.
I thought it already was proposed. I think it
was proposed too. I mean, it's that big,
and
it's the 955 Main Street. It's that big office professional building, which strikes me as like a no-brainer. I mean,
so it was proposed, but it was not part of what we voted on. And so
we didn't get there. We said we had enough, and we didn't move up that far.
Talked about the south of Clark, and this is the south of Clark.
No, this is north of Swanton.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, correct.
So my concern, and I think Taylor has come up with a way to alleviate that concern, is that we've spent the last couple of years working on a mixed-use corridor up North Main Street. And for the same reason that we initially had removed the commercial areas of the center business district from our 3A overlays, I am very concerned that putting 3A overlays on this part of North Main Street, which is predominantly commercial at the moment, is going really against the whole vision we had of this mixed use North Main Street area.
Yeah.
Now, Taylor,
Hmm.
you have come up with a solution, which I would hope, could you share that with us?
So what we can do in 3A is provide development incentives. So, and there's no, the, in the state law, it just says that the incentives have to be reasonable. It doesn't say, it doesn't give you specifics about what those incentives have to be. So let's just say if we want to add an area like this, but we want to ensure or do our most that we can to ensure that it's a mixed use district, we can say by right residential, you can build one floor, but if you do ground floor retail, you can by right do 2 floors. So 3 floors total, 3 stories total. And that would, for the most part, ensure the continued mixed use development of this area.
And I think 2.5 might be where we end up
Yeah,
considering.
our arbitrary numbers. Just
Right.
just know that those incentives can be put into place.
So the brilliant idea was that we would zone this area, which I think we're calling East 2 in our new North Main Street parlance, 1 story by right.
Yeah, the underlying zoning could actually be the first floor commercial with 2 stories of residential already. So it would essentially mean that no one would want to use the overlay district because they can get more without it. And I think we're actually at 3 stories there anyway. I believe that's the current zoning right now, I believe. So
I'm sorry,
it's,
Diab, I didn't quite track what you said. Are you saying that we should have this in the 3A as the reserve?
we can use, so the
I
key
think that's the
is,
proposal.
yeah,
Yeah.
so this is the reserve and we would use it for, I'm sure we could get, how many acres, Taylor?
6. It looks
6 acres. So, if we wanted to keep it in reserve, and so the key is that the underlying zoning would give us, we could set the underlying zoning to be first floor commercial plus 2 stories residential, which is, I mean, it's no higher than it already
and it
exists.
can't be a 3A.
But you do an overlay with the 3A, which says that you can do first floor, you can do 1 story residential.
Oh, but if you're
There's
willing to put in first floor commercial, you can go to 2.5 or whatever.
There's nothing in the state law which says that 3A has to give more, that 3A has to be more permissive than the underlying zoning.
So you're like
Because
down zoning in some ways with the 3A.
you could do, yeah, I mean, so
In
this
this
has,
instance, it would be.
yeah, and so I think this is where we have to look very carefully at what we do, where we get our extra units, because we are shy of units. And so one of the suggestions that Taylor thought of was to look at the North Wedge Pond area, which is currently at 4 units per acre, I believe. And it has, so we could bump up the density there. I know there are concerns about it being along the pond, but I think that any modern development would actually probably have more environmental safeguards than whatever the zoning was when those units were first built.
And again,
So,
this is just zoning density. It's not saying these changes shall be made.
yeah,
Well, there's a good chance they're going to happen. I mean, eventually I
Eventually,
guess the whole point of this is that they're going to happen. I mean, at some point.
well,
Right.
it's, for a town like Winchester, which, I mean, so I think you're right, Nick, for some of the other towns which have very little areas where you can do multifamily. But, when we're looking at, like, for instance, we're putting Parkview in the mix here, and it's never going to get redeveloped. And the Wedge Pond ones, some of those are condos, others are WHA, the Housing Authority. It'll take a lot to get those redeveloped. So, that's one of these things about this shell game that the state is playing here, is
Yes.
that it's, so if we increase the density to 6 units per acre on this parcel, it's not going to change the coverage very much.
I guess I'd just be it's sensitive that it's kind of the picturesque edge of the lake or pond that's in the center of town that you want to be a little sensitive to, but I don't know how the numbers translate to that.
I don't, this
I think
is,
if we include it in 3A and with a relatively low density, just a tiny bit higher, that it would be helpful to our calculations. And again, the likelihood, especially on the condo side, is extremely low. And on the other side, I don't know that the town has the money to put into the other property or whatever. I mean, I just think if we're talking about North White's Pond, we're not looking at it, but we're talking about it.
Right. I'm just wondering if we add the gray area as as an addition, and we use Taylor's method to promote mixed use. Will that increase the number of units? I mean, I would think that would increase the number of units to a comfortable level that would be sufficient to solve our current problem.
well, I think that, so it's like 6 acres, but if we're only doing a single story development by right, that's what we would have to put into calculation. And
But yeah,
so
if we use that East 2 as, imagine it's not a what do we call it, a surplus or a
reserve.
Reserve, right.
Imagine it's not a reserve. Imagine it's one of our districts, okay? This one on that's East 2, okay? And if the underlying zoning is 1 story, and the underlying zoning says if you want to put in mixed use on the first floor, you can add more stories, 1, 1.5, 2, whatever it is. So that's the underlying zoning that we would have in place for East 2.
No, it would be flipped. It would be flipped.
Okay, this is where I'm getting confused. So can you explain?
The underlying zoning would mean you have to have first floor commercial, and you can put up to 2 floors of residential above it. That's the underlying zone. That would be the as of right zoning without the overlay. The overlay would be 1-story residential. And so the incentive would be that no one would just build 1-story residential. They would want to have more. And so they would go and put in the commercial for first floor in order to get the extra floor.
Taylor, do you think the state, if we actually had this as one of our 3A districts, which we might need if they decline some aspect of our plan, does the state see that 1-story 3A zoning as acceptable?
We don't know. No one, the state hasn't replied to anyone's responses yet, so we don't know what the state will say. I will just say that we do need to be careful. This is definitely not down zoning. Even if this is 1 floor, we are giving more housing opportunity to this area than currently exists. So the total floor area may be decreased, but from the perspective of 3A, the housing numbers and density is going up, even if it is just 1 floor. I think we would probably have to realistically think about 1.5. But again, the numbers can come out when we do the final density count.
And there are 1.5 story houses all up and down North Main Street, so it's not an out of context underlying zoning.
I think I do have concerns that, one of the things that 3A zoning should not do is provide unrealistic. So if you're going to, let's assume that everything burns down, so you just have a field there. So is it financially feasible for someone to go in, buy that land and put in 1.5-story residential by right? Is that actually a financially or economically sound decision to make? And I think that 3A doesn't want you to put in zoning, which you know is impossible to actually develop any housing.
So, but you're saying it would be 1.5 in the underlying and in the overlay, unless you did the overlay incentive. That's what you're saying?
I'm saying that the underlying zoning would be single first floor commercial with 2 residential above.
Oh, okay. But if you put it in, but the 3A zoning would say 1 story.
Completely residential, first floor residential, 1 story. So
And I
there's
know they
certainly
have financial feasibility tests, and this is like,
I
instead
don't
of
know.
demanding something that's really expensive, we're demanding something that doesn't produce enough return.
That would be they might look at this and say, nobody could make money if they did this and no one would do it, which is being an
So we
example of,
reject it as a buffer zone. We reject it as a reserve. And if we do that.
I don't know. So I think what we could do is to, so there's no, I don't know. I mean, we don't have to actually treat every parcel in this lot the same way.
Well, you can't do spot zoning.
You can't do spot zoning. And this is something I think, Michael, I'm just really worried that, using this as a reserve really does a substantial number on our vision. In particular, that intersection of Swanton and Maine is actually it's a pretty vibrant place for business.
Especially with Park. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't want to lose that.
So are there other options for, I'm sorry, Yi-Ching, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Has this idea been like sieved through, has it gone through Michael Wang of Foreman Place? This is definitely GBD3, formerly known as GBD3.
Right.
Are we able to talk with him about that so that we can come up with an idea of how to optimize this in that way?
I don't think
parcels which are very unlikely to develop, right?
Yeah. Well, 955 is definitely hard to develop. Yeah.
We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, and he's gone through these things. So
what Michael is helping us with is with that underlying zoning. So he's already putting together, what if we are going to be looking at the tables tonight, all that information is starting from Michael's brain. So the underlying zoning for E2 has already been proposed. I think the conundrum that we have is, if we add this to the overlay, are we kind of accidentally ignoring the work that we're putting into revitalizing North Main Street by preventing people from using the effort that we're putting into the underlying zoning by putting the overlay on top of it?
And that leads to my question, is there other options for this reserve that we need to have? I mean,
do we need all of it? Do we need all 6 acres? Can we just do parts of it to get us enough of a reserve to feel safe enough to?
And I'm sorry, we submit the reserve with the initial.
No, the reserve is just for us. The reserve is just for us to not have to come back at a later date and have another conversation about it.
But it would be part of there would be, as far as the state's concerned, this isn't a reserve, it's part of our
you
plan.
want to propose it in this?
Oh, we have to, if we don't want to come back to the town.
Yeah,
I think we don't get to say, oh, this is just, I think this has to go to the state.
Right.
Michael,
all right, so it sounds like we're really worried that we can't get the layer of mixed use on the first floor.
Right.
Unless we put this 1.5 story thing in place, which we're worried that the state will think is too difficult to actually make happen.
Financially unfeasible is their test.
Right.
So do you have,
I mean, we are hedging. I mean, maybe we include it and
take us to
you know,
Brookline
something
for
will
a second.
stick.
Yeah, in
I mean-
Brookline, they had this problem and the state made a late advisory guidelines change, which said that if you permit
yes.
for commercial as
Yes.
of right, you can't use the acreage. Is that right?
That's correct. But you
But we
have,
don't
there
need
is
the
some,
acreage, we need the units.
but we do, well, there's a tricky part of that. You cannot have any parking requirements on the first floor commercial.
Which right now we would be proposing 0.75 per 1,000 square feet.
No, that's our residential parking requirements.
No,
But
that's the commercial, the residential is not by
Nope.
1,000 square foot, it's by.
0.7.
So
Five per unit.
the commercial is usually specified based upon the use. So for instance, if you have a restaurant, you have so many square
you're
feet,
right.
so many
Okay. Yes, yes.
patrons. So the state's sort of give on that was, yes, you could count the units, you cannot count the area, but you cannot put any sort of parking requirements on first floor commercial. So that's something to think about. The other thing I want to point out, if it's not aware, visually point out, is that we've already taken all of GBD2 and put it into 3A.
Right.
So we are already putting in a lot of that corridor is currently commercial. It may be underutilized, but it is commercial. So we've already said I mean, again, I'm really concerned that we're threatening our vision. So I don't know how to solve this right now. The buffer, I don't know, you know, as Taylor pointed out, one option is to say we have enough. We have 45 acres maybe, or 44 acres after we take out the chunks from the CBD or from the North Core, or whatever we're calling it these days, that we might have enough buffer. It's really just the units. And, you know, trying to figure out, you know, looking at the density south of Clark Street, maybe if we include the Shore Road lots, bumping up you know, going up a couple of units per acre on the North Wedge Pond would get us to the units we need. I think we need to play with those numbers.
We do need to see the numbers based on what we have straw polled tonight. But one thing that occurs to me about this conundrum, and Taylor, can you move that little drop down box? Thank you. That large condo office building, we get to this extremely unlikely to develop category. And so then you get to the smaller lots if you zoom in. And if you only were thinking about are those more likely to be redeveloped? I would say some of them, not all of them. So in fact, there's not first floor commercial in that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, it is first floor commercial there. You're right. The first two are commercial.
Oh, I'm sorry. Taylor, if you could move, I'm this side, I'm really worried about the corner more than anything else. So
well, maybe we don't include 955 and we just talk about the corner because.
Okay, so let's do that. Maybe I'm overblowing this. So Taylor, if you don't move the map, move your cursor, please. Move it to 955. Okay, now move south to the next lot south. Okay, that is, those are condos.
Multifamily condos, yes.
if you move to the next one there, that I believe is still a single family.
Mhm.
The one next to that is a 4/1. That's one commercial with 4 residential above it.
Mhm.
If you move to the next one, that's either a 1 or 2 family. I'm not sure which one. The next one is indeed commercial.
First floor
That's
commercial, right?
that's Andrea's Pizza, and it's got accounting services or something above it. And
Mhm.
there used to be a dry cleaner, but that storefront's empty. If you go to the one to the west, that is commercial, and that's the dentist's office. And then that one there is also commercial. I believe that is some sort of an insurance company, or maybe I got that wrong. So the commercial part really is solid, it's that corner area. And I don't think that, the only other commercial on that block would be that 4/1, which is in the middle of the block. And that's definitely not going to change hands because I believe it's 4 condos over one. So the development potential on this block is low.
Well, the development potential is low for the properties that are currently residential, multifamily, right?
Yeah.
And then the other properties, if they were included in 3A, the person would be able to build to the underlying zoning, right? The problem is if we make the Andrea's Pizza lot 3A, then they would, and it's existing, it's there, but say that they wanted to put 2 stories of housing above Andrea's Pizza in 3A, right? We can't, I get so confused about whether we can.
So if we put this under 3A, they could choose to tear down that building and put in residential, or they could just gut Andrea's and turn it into apartments. That's
Right.
another way. They don't have to tear the building down. They could buy it and turn Andrea's Pizza and the floors above it into residential as they are right now.
Where
You
as
know, they're
opposed, if they wanted to keep the first floor commercial and add housing above, and it was in the 3A district, what would that mean?
if it were in the 3A district, they could keep the first floor commercial and build above it. They would not be utilizing the 3A overlay district. They would be utilizing the underlying zoning.
If that's what we set as the underlying zoning.
If the underlying zoning is first floor commercial plus residential above, and they wanted to maintain commercial, then they would use the underlying zoning.
Right.
The only threat is that if we make this multifamily by right, they could presumably change the first floor to residential and change the second floor to residential. They could do that.
But they could make a 3rd floor residential. It wouldn't be a
They
3rd
could.
floor residential.
Well, they could add, if the building takes it, they could add a 3rd floor on top without demoing it. I don't know if it can.
That's a
Right
good
now,
point.
I think it goes up to 3. I think it all depends on whether what the overlay zoning for multifamily allows. If we allow 2 stories or 3 stories there, right?
Right.
So you're mostly worried about the corner, whereas the rest of those blocks, they would do fine if there were a by right 3-story or 3.5 residential.
With
It's
first floor residential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
it's
I think those
the
those
first.
2.
So how do we
Yeah.
protect Andrea's Pizza, basically?
Yeah, I think the 2 existing lots, which are now currently residential, they're really small. So I don't know what
Yeah.
size multifamily you could put on there. I don't think you could put 3 units on those lots. I mean, I can be.
Only has 1 story above it, I think. So if we
Could you-
build another floor, I don't know anything about if it's structurally sound to build another story, but
And that's not what we have to worry
That's-
about right now.
family looks like it's 2.5 or 3 stories.
You want to do street view, Taylor?
I mean, I suppose you could do a triple decker. That would certainly fit. But I don't think people like triple deckers. People really seem to like people don't like to build them. I mean, I don't think it would be. Okay, so that's if you
Here
turn
we are at the
around.
corner, right?
Yeah, so let's turn around. So that is
Two-family.
that's a two-family, or yeah, it is a two-family. This is the new building with the commercial and I think 4 units on top.
That's right.
So that's not going anywhere.
That's sort of the goal. So you're sort of looking for that sort of zoning. That's sort of like, you can automatically do this. Or-
Yeah,
No,
with
I
a
think-
little more style, I hope.
But you're trying to
I'm just saying
incentivize first
shape-wise,
floor,
general proportion.
but it
The
sounds to
idea-
me like you want to incentivize first floor commercial along the strip though. Like some of the
I-
undeveloped stuff, you want to incentivize more streetscape or street vitality for businesses.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's my vision for this area
Okay.
is that it could support that.
Okay, so then if the 3A overlay has a maximum of 1.5 or 2.5 or whatever of residential, you don't want that to over privilege that towards something that is commercial. So what is the maximum that we can do by right residential without overcoming the underlying zoning that incentivizes commercial on the first, right? That's the question.
Yeah,
And would that get us somewhere? So, but then it's a very short run though, however, of that need, because most of this has already been developed to residential. I just don't,
most of it's already been developed, period.
right.
I just don't see, with condos, they just aren't going to move. So
So
I mean,
are we
it's
not ready to
good.
move or move
I
on
don't-
this particular decision at this point?
I think it would be wise to whoever made the suggestion to talk to Michael and see whether he has some ideas on how we could create something in 3A, or Michael and Emily, which would allow us to meet the requirements of 3A, but still make the underlying zoning more attractive, which can, incidentally would probably provide more housing anyway.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So maybe we
the
don't,
underlying zoning just allows for a higher density of units to be built. It's just more economically profitable for whoever is doing that.
Yeah, I mean, this is already a fairly dense area in terms of what you can build. So, you can put 4 units on any of those tiny lots as long as you put commercial on the first floor. That's the existing zoning.
Okay, so we need a solution for that takes care of some of the parking issues also that you mentioned.
Right, so maybe we hold off on this particular decision until we have more information.
Yeah. So I think we have, so the real vote before us tonight is not on this, but to finalize our decisions on what we're going to do on Shore Road. And I think we have a consensus that we're going to if you could go back down to the Rotary, please, Taylor.
I could try to put together a motion with the help of the rest of the board.
Wait, so I want to raise one more issue that came through. I'm just doing a comparison. The Historic Commission raised the question and the ZRAC has mentioned it, and I just want to not ignore it. We will still be including, I think we're down to 4 parcels that are flagged as historically significant in the CBD zoning bylaws.
So which, can you point those
Two,
out, please?
yep, the little island of 2 down on the left. Those 2 are marked as historically significant. The one that we had talked about, I think it's Katana or the comic book, that little square. Yep, that cut out.
Oh, right. The comic books block.
Yep. And then part of the L. No, I'm sorry, the parcel, right? The shapes are different on the maps, so I'm actually not sure the address
There's
because
63 Vine would be
63
number
Vine's
4.
been- we're talking about removing that one, so that one's flagged, but then you'll see that L-shaped property behind 63 Vine, the one below that. So you're close, you're warmer up half of that on the zoning map. The top half of that parcel.
Oh,
It's divided.
So this is Allegro. So that historical building no longer exists.
Okay, so that's gone. So otherwise, by removing the area that we had included next to the rotary, we took a bunch of them out. So we're down to the little 2 that we could swap for the ones on Shore Road. Potentially, I'm just throwing ideas out, and then there's the little cutout that may come up, and then 63 Vine we've already removed.
So
those are good points.
So the one of the buildings over on the lower, let's look at that lower left purple one first. So one of those is an existing, that's like a 7-story building, correct?
It's
Did I get that one?
condos?
Yeah, no, they're apartments, I believe.
Oh, okay.
But I highly doubt anyone's going to tear that puppy down because.
I'm just calling them out because.
Yep, I agree. We should go through, not that one. Oh yeah, that is that one
Yeah,
from the
that's
back
the one.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just looks so different from that viewpoint.
So both of those are both things on that little block of streets are flagged as historically significant.
And the one next to it is that thing?
I'm just the messenger, friend.
No, I'm not, my comment is not directed towards you, it's towards the building.
Yeah,
It certainly did get covered over,
Whatever it is, it doesn't look anything like it used to.
or I can't even imagine what it used to look like.
Yeah.
yeah,
And apparently Sila, Heating and Cooling does a lot of business there. I
don't know.
I don't think that I personally don't see much here that other than that tree, which I think is a nice tree. Personally, I don't see much on this property that's historical.
We just had a measured request from the Historic Commission to make sure compared. So
no, I agree. I'm just looking at this. It's a 4-story building. It looks like it's being used as commercial at some level.
Maybe we could pull up the Macris report. It would have a photograph of what it used to look like.
So my one concern with the tall, I used to know the name of that tall, the 7-story apartment building.
Elmwood Towers or something.
I thought it started with an S, but it doesn't matter. So we're getting a lot of units out of that in terms of density.
We are. They're some of them are really small.
And I really doubt that. So here's the interesting thing, that apparently it's expensive to build buildings that tall. And so, especially according to modern standards, we were told that, for instance, no one would tear down Parkview and build any building that tall in again because it's just too expensive to go to that height. So I guess the question I have is, is there a realistic threat to the existence of that building if it goes under 3A? I can, that's the question. And I don't, I could see how people would think that the bank building. Yeah, go ahead, please. Sorry.
It may be more something that we want to keep in mind when we start, we want to specifically have those parcels in mind as we design some of the, design guidelines, that kind of thing. But I just wanted to make sure we hadn't, we are watched carefully. We are voices for everyone on this call and everyone watching. And I just didn't want to overlook that request to consider the ones that were flagged.
Nope, understood. Yes.
I can't guess what a developer is going to do. I'm with you. I think there's market value to keeping historic buildings historic, but that's not.
That seems, what I have heard over the last N years from people who develop is that unless the building is about to fall down, that there's a lot of value in historic structures for redevelopment,
Adaptive
that-
reuse, right?
adaptive reuse, or just gutting and redoing it because, unless you're in Boston where, you've got a big building in the middle of town and, prices are
we
insane.
can't trust the protection of the town to the whim of every contractor to come. So we have to sort of think like, is it worth it? Is it easy? Is it beneficial to the project at large if we just sort of like swap those parcels for the shore road? What do we gain or lose? I agree that the density might matter, but those shore road parcels are dense as well. So what's the trade?
But so we're already looking at what I would think we have a 10% deficit that we have to make up somewhere.
Mhm.
So,
If we take
so
this out, we aggravate the deficit.
Right.
if we take this out and put Shore Road in, and they're equivalent,
Right.
because then we haven't done anything. We haven't helped ourselves at
And we're
all.
also proposing to take out the comic book building.
Right, which if we take out the comic book building, we put in Shore Road, that will be a net gain.
But you'd have to keep,
I would just
you
like
have
to
to
note
keep
to
it in the
everyone
bonds.
that I have been notified that the removal of the comic book building would be considered spot zoning the opposite way, spot removing.
I see.
It is surrounded entirely 360 degrees by included overlay, and the state would more likely than not disapprove of that building's exclusion.
Mm-hmm.
We'll keep it in mind when we do our.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's a good update. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So going back to this building that I wanted to see the Macris report, if you click on the WNT 1030, it will take you to a document that has a photo of the building.
Well, that's for Vine Street.
Yeah, this is
the only dot there. So
yeah, and this is that building that we were wondering what's underneath.
No, isn't this the one I'm sorry, I'm totally wrong. Yeah, so
1970s building, so it probably
it
doesn't
says
look
it's a
very
single
familiar.
family house.
Huh.
there's something wrong with this.
It
Wait.
doesn't have the appearance of a historic building.
Well,
I
but
think this doesn't make any sense.
National Register. So they tore down a National Register building and built something in 1970.
And they
And it's
made
not
it
as-
historic, and now we're all in fits. This is terrible.
But what I don't understand is the historical commission was very careful about what they put in the historic resources in the center business district. So I think I find it hard to believe that they would mistake that building for 1870s, or I'm sorry, whatever the heck it used to be. Maybe we need to go back to historic and figure out what the heck's going on with that lot.
Okay.
I wonder if we can move ahead with.
Yeah, how do we do that so we don't have to revote?
And then if we have to come back to this later, we can do it. But I think we need to. We've come to consensus.
Yeah.
So the consent. Yeah. So why don't we? Can we go back to the map?
To the maps.
Taylor, please. So I think we have a consensus that the block to the west of the block that contains, let's call it the bank block, that we're going to remove that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I might start to cobble together a motion that that basically says we're going to go with option 4, except we're going to add 3 buildings on Shore Road. We're going to take out 63, and I think that's what we decided.
That, I think, is a really succinct summation. Thank you, Nick.
So I guess I could move that if we're at that point.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay. Do we need any further discussion?
Just a note for people watching, the 63 Vine is included in the purple right now. I don't know if you can change it, Taylor.
Part of the motion is to remove it.
Yeah, yeah.
I've actually been asked not to change the map while live, so
Oh,
no.
okay. And you're eating.
Yes, and I'm eating.
Okay.
So Okay, so we're going to remove 63 Vine. We're going to include the three. Should we get the addresses for those three so that we make sure we have them? So that is 8 Winchester Drive, 8 Winchester Place, 10. Oh, good Lord, I can't make that out. I need better glasses.
That's
10 U102. No, that doesn't make any sense.
No. I think it is,
10 Winchester Place. You just clicked
It
it
must be 10 Winchester Place.
are you saying 11 Shore Road?
I'm sorry. Yeah, but it's called something else.
The door must be on the Winchester Place side.
Oh,
Oh, 23.
23 Shore Road.
So what the heck
Yep.
was Winchester Place? So 23 Shore Road. What's the one to going towards town center?
11 Shore Road?
11 Shore
It could be,
Road.
the building could be split into two
That's true.
and have two addresses
Mm-hmm.
Crap. So
because
don't.
Winchester Place here and Shore Road. So I would actually
Oh.
trust
Oh.
this. I would trust this more than Google. So I would say that it's 8 Winchester Place and 10 Winchester Place. I think
Wait,
that those are
wait.
the accurate ones because that's what this is
Wait.
assessed as.
But the lots clearly front on Shore Road with no access to Winchester Place.
And it
Where's
says
Winchester Place? Where's Winchester Place?
It's right here. Right here. This is Winchester
Oh, I'm
Place.
confused as heck. Okay, so we're going to call it 8 Winchester Place, 10 Winchester Place,
Right, and then there was the parking lot. That was the third lot.
Yeah.
and what the
Which-
heck is that?
Actually, it's town and land, so I don't know if we can actually include that. I'll look into it.
Okay, so we at least have 8, 10, and then whatever that parking lot is north of 10, and we will include that if possible. So that would be, the motion would be this map minus 63 Vine plus 8 Winchester plus 10 Winchester plus the lot north just adjacent to 10 Winchester to the north.
Okay, and we got a second from Kerry.
We got a second from Carrie. Further discussion? I think there is no further discussion. Let's do a roll call vote.
I'm sorry, I was muted, Diab. Is it keeping the two buildings that are the purple buildings that are on the left? Well, right on
Yes,
that right
yes.
angle corner?
Yeah, it's keeping those for now until we can get some
Yes, we're
clarification.
keeping those. We're keeping those.
And we can't use the one, we can't take out the comic book building.
We can't take out the comic book building. So it's this map minus 63 Vine plus the 3 lots on Shore Road.
Mhm.
So that's the motion.
At least
That's the
two
motion. Yeah.
we're allowed to do.
So let's do a roll call vote unless there's any further discussion.
Harry, I want, what was your concern?
The parking lot, if we're allowed.
And the parking
we're
lot if
allowed.
we're allowed. Yes.
If we're allowed.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Second.
Everybody's happy with that? Any
Yep,
more
and this
discussion?
would be the CBD 3A.
This would be the, yeah, this would be the part of the overlay district, include whatever we're going to call this, the North Core, who knows?
Well, yeah, but this is the CBD portion of
let's
3A.
call
Yeah,
this
this
the-
is this is the CBD portion of the 3A.
Yeah, why don't we call this the town center portion or something? Because the CBD people have this vision of the CBD.
right.
So let's just call this the town center portion. So this is the motion. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Can we move to a vote?
Yes.
Okay, Sally,
Aye.
Carrie,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Yi Ching,
Aye.
and I say aye as well. Okay, thank you all. I think we really have run out of energy. It's 21:21 or 9:21, sorry for those. We do have, I am very concerned that we have a lot of work yet to do to finalize the use and dimensions on our lots on North Main Street.
Yes, and Diab, Taylor sent us something and asked us to get back to him by Friday. So I started diving into it, and
Yeah.
it's really complex, and I'd much rather do it in everybody goes through it as deeply as they can, and then we have a roll up your sleeves working session to understand what is in front of us.
Well,
It's very
let's
complex.
let's not forget that we need to have a draft out soon, and Taylor has published a schedule, which Taylor, you might want to make that public somehow so the public
Can you put
knows
it on your screen?
Taylor, were you expecting to present on that to us tonight, or were you?
I was not expecting to do
So
anything with that
it's not-
tonight.
I
I'm
think-
happy.
Okay. So what?
When can someone just give me the timestamp on that email that Taylor wants us to work on?
That was sent out on the 25th, I believe.
Oh, okay.
It was Taylor, you should make that public since we're discussing it, but it essentially, for those in the studio audience, as it were, Sally put in an insane amount of effort in terms of pulling together all the places in the zoning that needs to be changed, as well as putting together forms that we could use to discuss different uses for the different districts.
Well, no, John, I didn't do the forms. I think Griffin did.
I think there's one thing that's a little confusing, and I'm not putting any blame anywhere, is that we haven't yet decided on the names for our districts. So in some of that document refers to the names that were used by Goldson and all. Some of the document uses names used by Michael Wang. So I think we need to come up with.
What's the title of that email that I'm looking for?
It's from Taylor. It's
draft zoning amendment.
Draft zoning amendment.
And it was on the 25th?
Yep.
That's my recollection.
It's a 44.
Oh, here it is. Oh, okay. I have it highlighted. Okay.
It's a 44-page document in which you are invited to do track changes in the review mode.
Okay.
Which is a technically challenging thing for me. I'm very embarrassed to admit.
So,
okay.
We can, so again, I just want to call everyone's attention that we're using different names for the same place sometimes. So when you try to keep them straight, and if you can't figure out which one is which, please reach out to Taylor until we come up with, a consistent set of names.
So what I would like to suggest is that we all, between now and Friday, scribble down or put in little bubbles in the track changes thing, all the questions that you have about this, or need more information, or don't understand, and then we go into a really roll up your sleeves working session on this 45-page document, because we've got to get it to town council for preliminary review. And Taylor, you put together a schedule for that, if you can bring that up. I think it was the email.
I think it's the same email. I think there's there it is.
If we could have a graphic that explains some of the names, the multiple names used for each district, I think that would be very helpful.
Well, so one of the first things I noticed as I started to go through this was that Beverly Mesa Zent, who was paid for by the state to do early consulting to the town through Jen Goldson, she is the one who on page 1 of this 42 document used the RMH OD1 and OD2 parlance. And that's what we're not using anymore. And she also, so it's got to be fixed when we do the big rolling up your sleeves working session. It's just people need to understand.
Yeah, and those were for different districts as well. So those were, I mean, again, the districts have changed since that one. So
this is a very not up to date in Kansas City, but you grabbed what was the last thing we had from the consultants. Which is
right. So why don't we do this? Taylor, you and I, we can discuss this tomorrow. Why don't we sit down and come up with an interim set of names for the different districts, and we will use that moving forward, and they'll be whatever they are. I think we're going to be consolidating some of these east, west, south, north ones.
Well, when Taylor, if you go through this, the
Yes,
MUI, multi-use one, has a subtable that's got the West 2 as one, E3, E2 and E3 as another, and
yeah,
U3 as one, and there is no W4, and then E1 and East 1 and West 1 as one of them. And so it's 4 sub-districts in the new all of
right.
North Main Street district called multi-use 1.
Right, but I don't know that we have decided to split North Main into 6 separate
Oh, he's got it
districts.
as 4 here for zoning purposes, for code
Okay.
purposes. The
Okay,
table
okay.
only breaks it down to 4.
Okay, that's good.
It's 7 subzones with 4 sets of different zoning dimensions.
Okay, we're gonna have to come
This
up
is
with the
not
table.
it's so I hear you. We need to do work on clarifying what each zone is. I do encourage anyone. I do not care how your notes get to me. If it's pencil on paper and then scanned, that is excellent. It
Taylor,
doesn't matter to me how they get to me. And I'll
Wait a
put
sec.
everyone's comments together in one thing. Or Monday.
Forewarned is fair warned. This is where I got.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for
Okay.
laughing, Harry.
Um,
I'm nervous for Taylor. That was the laugh.
No, I was going to do a cleaned up version. I promise.
I know.
promise.
okay, so we have our marching orders. Get stuff to Taylor. You know, by carrier pigeon if necessary. Any other things we should do before we sign off this evening?
Just pay attention to that February 5th date on Taylor's email.
Yikes. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for
Good
scaring
talk.
us. Okay, well, we actually still have quite a few people who hang out with us all the way to the end here. So first off, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. I'll move that.
And is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. I just want to remind the board we are meeting next Tuesday. We have a schedule. We're going to be talking about Waterfield. Okay, so a roll call vote. Nick.
Aye.
I Ching.
Aye.
Carrie.
Bye.
Sally.
Aye.
I say aye as well. Once again, thanks to all of our residents for joining us this evening. Thanks to Nancy Polcari, our recording secretary. Thanks to WinCam as always. I shouldn't say as usual. We appreciate your being there. Thanks to Taylor, wherever you are on my grid here, Taylor. Thanks to Taylor for being with us this evening. Thanks to everyone out in TV land.
Absolutely.
And
And
we
all
will.
the members that showed up tonight.
I'm
Very
sorry.
grateful for your
And
presence.
the ZRAC members that showed
Oh
up.
yes, thanks. Yeah, there are a lot of ZRAC people here. Much appreciated. And we will see you all again in a week. Have a great week, folks.
Good night.
Bye.